Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode. I'm joined by Kirstene Ciappara. Believe I've said that correctly. She's my buddy. I know her as Casey, and I'm really excited to have her on the show today. She's a teacher, she's a coach, and really just a voice that I respect when it comes to talking all things passion, purpose, mission, all that good stuff that I imagine a lot of us are longing for. So I'm excited to hear about some tools and ideas that can help us unlock that feeling of feeling connected to a sense of purpose and passion, because it can be elusive. I know for myself and certainly a lot of you guys that tune in. So with that said, KC, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. And I really love what you said. It can be elusive. And I think it's like, well, then if it's something so elusive and so out there, how am I ever going to be able to understand it for myself? And I really love being able to take the more spiritual side of things and bring the practicality into it so we can all connect with it. So it's a pleasure to be here.
I bloody love that. And I kind of touched on it there anyway, but I think that's one of the big challenges I see facing most people at its core is like, what do I want to do with my life? Like, how do I feel that sense of passion? How do I feel like I have a sense of purpose? And unless we kind of, dive into some specifics and some practices, and it can be very abstract. And I think that's what makes it so challenging sometimes. So I reckon this will be a lot of fun and really useful for so many people. To kick things off, and I guess to provide some context, give us a snapshot of the work that you do in this space, and then we'll kind of dive into the nitty gritty.
Sounds good. So like you mentioned, I am a teacher. I have a teaching background, which is why I think I like to see these abstract terms thrown out that people are familiar with, but don't know how to apply them to their lives. So I like to dive into those areas myself and then be able to teach them in a way that people can apply to their lives. So traditionally, and I went down the pathway of secondary teaching, English, PhD, and this is something I'll touch on a little bit later, but I was really faced with the challenge of, I don't love what I'm doing. Like, I'm getting the Sunday Arvo dread. And I just had this sort of voice within me being like, there's something more, like you're not meant to dread your work so much. And anyway, I found myself then following my curiosities. I did some study around career development at uni, and was really and that was when I was first introduced to this concept of life design, and more specifically then career design, and I loved it. And then I found myself really following that, and then I believe it or not, beautiful synchronicities came together, and someone sent me a job role, which was a teacher of life design in a school. And I couldn't believe that I was going from teaching, traditional subjects that really just felt like I was ticking a box, to actually teaching students or guiding students with unpacking their strengths, their interests, their motivations, and ultimately their purpose. And it was the purpose part that was really hit home for me. And I always say the biggest catalyst for me unlocking my purpose was helping students unlock theirs. And then that set me down a beautiful rabbit hole of exploring how to unlock our purpose. And I've just finished off a certification in life purpose coaching too. So still doing the teacher of life design role, love it. And I think there's a massive revival that's needed in education. And I think it's a big part of why there are so many adults who don't know what they're passionate about because their school system let them down. So I think there's a need for me there, but then I also am like, I know there's coaching or there's teaching work for me outside of the secondary school space too.
Yeah. I can't tell you how passionate I am about the education piece, and I don't have any ties to the education system, but it just makes sense on a common sense level to be able to teach, particularly at an impressionable age, coming up through teenage years, to be able to learn tools and ideas and almost navigate through life, to be able to connect to these big, important things we're talking about, purpose, passion, etc. Because it's very easy to get lost when you get released into the big, bad world. So without those tools, it can be really, really challenging. So kudos to you for, contributing in that way. Purpose, passion, it's easy to use this terminology as one and the same, but I know from your perspective there are some differences. I think it's really cool to be able to identify what they are before we dive further. So from your point of view, when you're teaching this stuff and you're working with clients, for example, how do you position purpose vis-a-vis passion, for example? Let's start there.
Totally. And I love being able to distinguish it, because I do think they get thrown around interchangeably and they just get used as well, like almost loosely as well. But I think it's really good to give them some concrete sort of definitions, because the more we can understand the terms, the more then we can, I guess, integrate them into our lives. Yeah. So I look at passions as almost a prerequisite to your purpose. So your passion is your highest joy. So that's where you're integrating the things that you're naturally good at, which are your strengths, and the things that you're naturally curious about or excited about, so your interests. So I really see your passions as infusing what you're good at and what you enjoy together. And then once you can match those passions with a need in the world or a problem to solve or a way to contribute, you've got your purpose. So I see that your purpose is really your passions matched with contributing to a world in a way that adds value. And I would even then go, and with your purpose, I would say that it can change and evolve as you change and evolve as a person. Ultimately, I would then add in like a sort of a third layer, which is like your mission, and almost like you've got a mission statement. And I really believe that mission statement does stay the same. It's how it manifests can obviously change depending on, our passions might change or evolve, our purpose, how it looks might evolve, but ultimately that mission statement is with us, or something that is innate in us. But I think we need to go through the other sort of levels to be able to get to that mission statement.
Yeah, I agree. It's a really good way to look at it. And I like that you said, like, when you take the abstract and you give it some concreteness, it makes it easier to do something with it. So I really like the way you position that. Where do you see people falling down? Because I think a lot of people, myself included, can hear you articulate those differences and go, yeah, I get that makes sense. But yet it can still be really challenging to kind of connect, into that. And I know you have some ideas of how we can do that, which we'll get to in a sec. But what are some of the obstacles that you found, I guess, get in the way, whether it's, the fear of judgment or the fear of failure, like our own self-ridicule, childhood stuff? Like, what are there commonalities that you see that are kind of just getting in the way of being able to lean into this stuff and have that clarity?
Totally. I think, so going back to the school thing, is we're not really taught how to become self-aware in schools. We're not really taught how to get to know ourselves, despite the fact that we're with ourselves all the time. We just actually don't even really know ourselves on a deeper level. And that's why I think, obviously there's so much merit in doing the inner work, because that is really building that relationship with yourself. So the more you build that relationship with yourself, the more you start to notice, oh, that comes really naturally to me. That could be one of my strengths. Or I'm really curious, or this really excites me. That's one of my interests. So I think the more you don't try and rush the process. I think we can be very like, I want the results yesterday, and we're in that instant gratification. Whereas getting to know yourself is like, you can't rush getting to know someone else in a relationship. So it's almost the same token you've got to apply to yourself. It takes a bit of time to go on that journey to get to know yourself beyond that maybe surface or the mask that maybe you've been wearing or putting on. So I think first and foremost is not wanting to rush it. And also just, again, and we'll go into some of the tools, is actually being equipped with tools, with self-discovery tools. Because I think even when you do enter the, the personal development space, it can almost hit you like a truck. It's like, whoa, there's actually so much to learn. There's so many modalities. Where do I start? What journal entry? And that's why I really, again, the teacher in me almost wants to take someone through a journey, like a step-by-step process of essentially getting to know yourself, so that you can unlock your passions, so you can unlock your purpose, so you can, I guess, start to paint the picture of your bigger mission then.
Yeah, it's huge. It's interesting. I often joke on the show and just in conversations I have with people that, like a lot of people that will probably be tuning into this kind of program, I'm a personal growth junkie. I'm always looking to optimize, upskill in some way, understand the world of myself better. But then it's like, how do we, I think it's important to reconcile that against also honoring, I don't know if that's the word I would use, but just leaning into what is just organic and natural, and kind of allowing that to come to fruition, because that's when it can get really exciting, right? So what are some ways we can start to tap into that feeling? Like I've heard you speak about innate gifts and even just some of the challenges that we face and obstacles and the stuff that comes up for us. Are there clues for all of us to start noticing in that getting to know ourselves piece that we can, I guess, be aware of moving forward to help narrow in on what it is that maybe excites us, maybe what it is that actually tickles that, that interest box for us that we can fan into a passion and perhaps a purpose?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I think first things, when it comes to the excitement piece, or the interest, I think quite often we can shut things down as well. We can be like, oh, I'm interested in this. This really excites me, but there's no way I could make a career out of this, or there's no way that there's going to be, there's any value or meaning in it. But the fact that you are curious, the fact that it excites you, it evokes that reaction in you, is there for a reason. It's like they're little breadcrumbs to follow. And just because we might not see the full picture of how it can evolve, it doesn't mean it's not worth exploring. And I always go back to, I had sort of like the interest in career development. I did that. And then that opened up life design. And then that opened up the teaching role. And then that opened up purpose. So when I first started studying career development, I didn't know I was going to be going deep into purpose, but I just kept following the breadcrumbs, following where my interest, and like I said, synchronicities and doors started to open up. So I think it's not ruling out the things that just spark that light for you. And there are many ways that you can have a look at what actually sparks a light for you. And a couple of tools that I love to work with is, there's obviously heaps of when it comes to journaling and reflection, but it doesn't have to be then something you then add on to, your already, morning routine to figure these out. It's just go about your day and notice, okay, when I'm scrolling through social media and getting all of this information, what am I actually like stopping and reading? Like, what am I stopping and watching? Who am I following? What am I searching online? Like, it's being really observant about where your energy is being drawn. And the more you can like sort of go into your days wanting to observe that, the more you will start to notice things like, oh, that pulled me there. Or that kind of, I stopped reading that and I thought that was interesting. Whenever I've worked with clients and they've been feeling a little bit stuck, I just plant that seed in them and tell them, just be attentive to where your curiosities go or what excites you. And then they'll always come back with things after that, because they've started to notice. So I think bringing it to the forefront is really important when it comes to the excitement side of things. When it comes to, I guess, your natural gifts or your strengths, is it actually, we work with some life coaches at school as well, and this always stood out to me when he said it, is that he's like, why do you think people don't know their strengths? And I go, oh, I don't know, maybe they don't want to seem like too cocky or things like that. He's like, no, he's like, the reason people don't know their strengths is they overlook the things that come easy to them, and they think because it comes easy to them, it just must come easy to everyone. And it doesn't. Like, the fact that it comes easy to you is an indicator that it is a gift of yours. And I always like to say everyone's got like their own sort of superpower. And when I was first asked, like, Kirstene, what do you think your superpower is? I didn't have an answer to that question straight away. But again, it was at the forefront of my mind, went along, throughout my day, and then it like literally dropped through. And I was like, oh, like I just get really excited. Like I get really excited about things. I always have. I'm like, maybe that's my superpower. And I went back to the person and I asked them, like, I get really excited, but I used to just always think, doesn't everyone just get really excited and really enthusiastic? And they're like, no, like that's not everybody. And I realized that I'm like, okay, that's something that I've overlooked in the past. It comes really easy to me. It doesn't come easy to everyone. Boom. Like that's a strength. And when we stop thinking that strengths have to be these, exceptional grand things, we start to look at the everyday things that we do easily and well. And we realize, wow, that's actually one of my gifts that I get to share with the world. So yeah, I think it's just particularly for the passions piece, which it is marrying up what you enjoy and what you excel at or what you're good at, is it is not trying to force yourself to become an expert of something else. It's about looking at what do I just innately feel pulled towards, what do I just, am I able to do effortlessly and experience flow in, and that is like, that's where the passions will really ooze from.
Yeah, that gets me up and about, that idea of flow, right? And so this and this idea of like force versus flow. And you mentioned the word force in that piece as well. So is that like a huge component of what we're talking about, is like what in our life feels really rigid and forced versus what just fucking feels right? That force versus flow piece, I think that's huge for people to start to unpack, and allowing ourselves to not, like you said, not have all the answers right now, but just trusting that you can follow those breadcrumbs.
Exactly. And it's hard. Like, I can be a control freak too. I'm like, I love to plan. I love seeing the steps, and I love, and I think as much as we do need that structure, and I really value structure and seeing, I wouldn't be like, in a stable job and then be like, oh, I'm interested in this, so quit that. Like, I don't think that's a viable option. But I think the fact that we are interested in something is an invitation to keep exploring it. And that's where the more you can start to allow yourself just to explore it, the more puzzle pieces, I think, start to come together, which is really beautiful. And I think the beauty to reframe not being able to see, the whole linear pathway, is the fact that you actually get to really experience the magic of it. Like, I'm so glad that I didn't have a linear path to where I am right now, because the magic that has unfolded in the past 12 months, or the synchronicities, will be something that stays with me for the rest of my life, and something that I always anchor into. So sometimes it's actually more fun to not know the whole path. And I just wanted to add on to the force and flow thing as well, is that ultimately our purpose or our mission, it's meant to feel easy. It's meant to flow. Like, it doesn't mean that we're not going to have some challenges along the way, but it's meant, like, the universe, God, however you want to describe it, has embedded our purpose into us in a way that feels really easy and natural. So we'll be inclined to go down that way. Quite often when we're going down that force pathway, the pathway that's not aligned with us, we're going to keep hitting all these hurdles and all these blocks. And ultimately, it's not to punish us, it's to redirect us back to that flow pathway.
It's huge. Do you think that in today's world, with so much information, examples, social media amplifying our access to other people's journeys, all that stuff, it becomes easy to get lost, and we start trying to, move and shake in a way that's consistent with how we think we should be because of this person, or we should be doing our purpose and our mission and everything in between should be a certain way because of that person or this school of thought, as opposed to just being like, I feel like, and look, maybe I'm just speaking from my own personal experience and just sort of having a ramble out loud, but I think it's super easy just to get lost in what you should be doing or what sounds good on paper versus what the fuck lights me up. And I reckon as you get older, and with that, access to social media amplifying things, you kind of lose that ability to like trust your gut almost. Is that something that you find with people as well?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, like, I've even seen it translate in my life around, building my business. It's like, I feel like I should be doing this, or I should be creating an offering like this, but then I'm like, I'm so attentive now to, does doing it this way excite me? And if it doesn't, I'm like, it's not for me. And I think it's hard because, you can see people being successful in, following a particular route. So you think, oh, that's the pathway to success. But I think it's really important to distinguish that could be their pathway to success.
Yep.
Doesn't mean it's your pathway to success. And by you trying to force yourself to go down that pathway, you could actually just be shooting yourself in the foot more. And call me call me oblivious or whatever it might be, but I just believe the more that we are in tune with what lights us up and the more we follow that, we can't not be successful. And I know we might not always be able to see the pathway that leads to success, but I really believe that if we're attuned to what lights us up and we're allowing ourselves to follow that, like doors open up in ways that I can't even begin to describe.
Yeah, I like that a lot. So we've got this idea of exploring those interests, which we all have them, and sometimes like that process probably gets easier as you start to go down that path as well too, right? You start to trust yourself a bit more. You almost build that muscle of like leaning into what feels kind of nice, and then all of a sudden it just gets easier and easier. So cool, that makes sense. We start fanning those flames of interest. Perhaps that turns into something bigger, perhaps it doesn't, but it's probably better than sitting in that idleness of like, what the fuck do I want, right?
And I think just on that as well, we might find, like I've just finished off a unit with our Year 9 students where they have prototyped different career pathways that are of interest to them. And, some of them have gone down, have done their prototypes and be like, yes, I love this, I want to learn more. Great. Some have been like, you know what, I've done it. I realize now that I actually really don't like it. I'm like, you know what, awesome. That's also great, because knowing what you don't like is also just as effective at times as knowing what you do like. And then some of them might be like, you know what, I prototyped it. There's elements of it that I like, but there's elements of it that I don't like. Great. Like the more data you can collect about yourself, the better. Yep. Like one student was saying that they explored like child, like to be a child psychiatrist, and they realized that there was a big nurturing element of that career that they loved, but the actual, mental stability, all of that side of it wasn't for them. I'm like, great, take what lands for you and then let go of what doesn't. So the more you can start to build up the data, right? Like I say, I love saying the more data you can collect on yourself, the better. The more you'll start to connect different things that, maybe you didn't think that there was a connection with before.
Yeah. I'm all about collecting data and then being able to use that in a way that's going to live ultimately what we're talking about is just trying to live a fulfilling life, right? And the more data points we have, the easier it is to make decisions accordingly. And so what I'd love to kind of explore with you is, and we've touched on it already, but like understanding ourselves, like it or not, we're going to have a certain makeup about ourselves that I'm going to be different to you, and that's going to be different to the next person. Honoring that, and then looking for ways to, whether it's career or the way we spend our spare time, but like making those decisions in line with that stuff so that we do feel in that flow state, right? Yeah. And I think what's really interesting is as we go down that path of understanding ourselves and going, oh, that actually makes me really interested, and that I fucking hate. And, oh my God, I love talking to people. I love doing this, but I hate spreadsheets or whatever it is. Yeah. We can kind of narrow that down into archetypes. And this is something I've heard you talk about quite eloquently, and it's super interesting. You sent me something through the other day around the entertainer piece. We'll get to the examples in a sec, but yeah. I can't tell you how much sense that makes, right? So like I'm the kind of guy that, like I could sit here and just talk for 15 hours straight and not lose any ounce of energy. But then if I had to like scribe these notes and my takeaways on a piece of paper, I would like fucking pass out. Like I can't, like anything that's detail oriented just doesn't feel right. But if I got a chance to make someone laugh, make them smile, make them feel a certain way, it's like, yeah, I'm in my pocket. And that's me personally. And it's like, okay, are there opportunities to lean more into that? Obviously the podcast is just one way to do that, but it's just an interesting example of like leaning into just what comes naturally for me personally. And then, of course, for you, I've heard you speak about what comes really natural for you, and then leaning into that and being able to help people and do all these amazing things that you're doing. So can we walk people through, I guess, what archetypes mean?
Yeah.
And then how we can use that to our advantage, and then we'll talk about exactly what they are.
Totally. Just quickly, I want to add, like, you can tell that your medium of choice or your preferred medium is conversations, is speaking. And I think it's really, again, it's once you start to collect that data, then and that might sit for a while, that might brew for a little while, but then you'll be like attentive to when there's an opportunity to do a podcast, like, oh, that connects with my medium, or that connects with what excites me. So I think, allowing it just to sit with the data that you collect about yourself for a while, you'll be amazed at what opportunities either come your way, or opportunities you then are attentive to responding to, because those things are at the forefront. So just wanted to add that. But yes, the archetypes, I love archetypes, and it's something that is used, in the personal development world in all different ways. And there's many different sort of I guess types of archetypes depending on your topic that you're focusing on. And I did my life purpose coaching certification through the Dharma Coaching Institute. So Sahara Rose, I'm not too sure if your audience will be familiar with her, but she's come up with these 9 sort of purpose-driven archetypes. And I loved them. I fell in love with them when I read her book, and that's why I was so drawn to studying with her. And so essentially, archetypes are a way that they look at patterns of behavior or patterns of qualities, and then they kind of group those patterns into a profile. And by having the profiles, people can essentially be like, oh, I actually really resonate with that profile. And what it does is it's still a tool. It's a tool for them to help people to understand themselves better based on the ones that they resonate with. And in turn, that can help them better understand their gifts, help them better understand their interests, and help them to ultimately, particularly with these purpose archetypes, help them to understand how they can use their gifts to contribute to the world, which is really that purpose element, is marrying up what they're already good at, or what comes naturally to them, with a way that they can contribute to the world. They can solve a problem in the world, add value, whatever it is.
All right, cool. Makes a lot of sense. And again, just goes back to having that extra data point, right? To understand ourselves and then, make decisions accordingly. That's going to light us up. So I mentioned before, for me personally, I probably fall very heavily into this entertainer archetype. And of course, there's some amazing strengths and good stuff that comes with that. And then obviously there's some limitations too, but it's like, okay, is what it is. Let's just lean into it so I can feel good and feel in my pocket is sort of the language that I would use. So we're not going to be able to go intricately into everyone, of course, right now. And I encourage you guys listening to connect with Casey to learn a bit more. She does some coaching stuff, has some amazing content online, and you guys can go deep on this. It's super fun. But could we give a snapshot of what maybe those 9 are? And then that might sort of provide enough information for people to start recognizing, oh, maybe I'm a bit of that, or maybe that's me.
Yeah, absolutely. So on Sahara's website, which I can send it through to you as well, she's got a quiz which will help you to identify your top 2. Okay. So they can be good to do, but it also, just as I explain them, it might be good for your listeners to think intuitively which ones do stand out to me, and then they can see. And sometimes the ones that do come up, particularly when doing the quiz, might have been ones that we've actually been maybe suppressing a little bit, but are really innate in us too. So it's interesting to compare. So you've got 9 archetypes, and we've got all of them within us, just to varying degrees. The ones that we're more naturally drawn to, the ones that we're more, I guess, dominant in, we are more dominant because they will help us to step into our purpose. And so the 9 are, the first is the activist. So an activist is here to bring about social and political change. So anything, if you've got people that are really passionate or really drawn to that type of work or contributing in that way, they've probably got a high activist archetype. You've got the artists, and so the artists, they can, see the chaos, all the many different options and I guess avenues, and they're here to bring beauty through all of that chaos. So I always like to describe a friend of mine who is an interior designer, and so she's got artist as her number 1 archetype. Remember, we drove past like a light shop once, and there was like hundreds of thousands of lights. So to me, with artist is very low for me, I'm just like chaos. And she's like, I know the exact light in that shop that I want for my client. I'm like, you can take, look at the chaos and take the beauty from it and create beauty, which is really cool. Entertainer, like you've touched on, so they're really here to make people feel, whether it's make them feel happy, sad, make them feel the whole spectrum of human emotions, because that is the human experience. So we've got the entertainer, we've got the entrepreneur, so that's the person or someone who's got that archetype quite high. They want to solve problems, and often they want to solve problems through businesses or through organizations. It doesn't mean that they've got to have their own business. They might just be an intrapreneur, which is where they've got those entrepreneurial skills within an organization. So they're very innovative. You've got your nurturer. So a lot of coaches would have this too, because they want to really be able to care and connect deeply with people, but obviously can manifest in so many ways outside of coaching too. Got the researcher, so someone who wants to really dive deep and understand the ways of the world. Got the teacher, which is my number one. They love to be able to learn and then share their knowledge. And I've really realized lately that when I learn something new, I get really excited and I'm like, I've got to go share this with someone. And like, that's my teacher archetype, because we complete our learnings through sharing them. You've got your warrior. So that's people that are here to really protect or to lead. And then you've got your visionary. So they're here to welcome in like the new paradigm. So I guess if there's a new way of doing things, whatever that might be, new way of education, new way of health, new way of work, whatever it might be, they're here to bring in the new. They see the potential and the possibility, and they're here to bring that in, or to welcome that in. So like I said, we've got a combination of all 9 of them. All of them have gifts. All of them have their shadow sides when they're maybe underdeveloped or overdeveloped. All of them have, I guess, careers that align with them, but the world of work is changing constantly. So how, an activist might look now might be different to 10 years time. How a teacher looked 20 years ago might be different to now. And I think what's really beautiful, particularly about, getting the top 2 from Ciappara's quiz, is the combination. I think that's where the beauty is, because so many people are obviously going to maybe share the same top archetype, let's say, but maybe what their second, their third, their fourth is, that combination is really unique. And actually, I'm by no means a mathematician, but when I was trying to figure out, like, okay, if I was to rank my top archetype or my most dominant archetype with my least one and rank them from 1 to 9, there's over 350,000 combinations that you can get from your 1 to 9. Wow. So it just really shows the uniqueness of the archetype tool in itself. But then you match that with, your the areas that you excel at, the areas that you're excited with, and it all shifts or influences then how you bring those archetypes alive too. So.
I love that. Thank you so much for going through those. That's really cool. And people tuning in, watching the show, I'm sure you'll start to resonate a little bit with some of those. But yeah, certainly worth doing the quiz. I think I did that with you one time, didn't I, Casey?
Yeah.
It was super interesting to see what that order looked like, and like you said, have that unique recipe that makes up what feels right for me in terms of these different archetypes. Entertainer, I mentioned, but there's also a couple others that were, coming to the surface as well. Something I want to talk about is the idea of how aggressively we should or need to use this information. I guess to put in layman's terms, I'm wondering if some people may be hesitant to go, yeah, but I also need to pay the bills. I got a family and all real stuff, right?
Totally.
At what point do we need to sort of, and maybe it's a mixed bag, but at what point do we need to, design our life so that our career and kind of everything in between is in line with our archetype that allows us to live into that? That's in line with our mission, so we can serve in that way. That's in line with, feeling that sense of passion and purpose, versus, what I will call the realities of life. Is this something that people should be trying to incorporate into their everyday work for a living, or is it sufficient to, to still feel good and live an exciting life, to explore this stuff purely just in our day-to-day, whether it's social interactions, what we do for fun, etc.? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love this. It's a topic I'm really passionate about, because ultimately we need money and we need that stability to survive. So by no means am I the type of person that's been like, you should align your work with your purpose and then forget about the need to be financially stable. Like, no, we need that. And I think it's a process, because I think there's so many of us who for so long had been working out of alignment with our passion and purpose that it is going to be a transition process. So I guess my answer is kind of multifaceted, because yes, I do believe that we need to align our work with our passions and purpose, because we spend so much of our lives at work that it just doesn't make sense to me to not align it with our highest potential. With that being said, does that mean we have to up and leave our jobs now? Absolutely not. I think it needs to be a transition. And so, these archetypes transcend more than just our work and career. So a great starting point is just to be tapping into them in our relationships, in our hobbies, or in the things we do for fun, seeing where that leads. It might even be like starting your own blog, or starting, whatever your medium is that you like, and then marrying that up with your archetypes. That's a great starting point. It might even be the side hustle avenue. So whilst I ultimately believe that that's the goal, we should strive to have our full-time work, or what financially supports us, aligning with our purpose. I think that's a process as well, and we need to transition. Particularly because, like I said, we haven't had schooling to support us with getting there, whereas I'd like to hope that the students that I've got now, it'll be a non-negotiable for them to be passionate about what they do when they leave school, because they've had that messaging from year 7. I've just hopped off a call about values with our year 7 class. Like, they will know that these concepts are so important in designing their life. But we've got to also be patient with ourselves, because we didn't have that. So it's going to be a bit more of a transition for us. And I think it's also it's not shutting things down. So it's like, okay, I can see where there is, a linear path for maybe an entrepreneur or a teacher. Teachers, I'm probably a little bit hypocritical, because I've probably got the safest archetype, if we were to say teacher. Whereas if you were to take something like artist or entertainer, it doesn't seem as linear. But I think it's like marrying it up with the other archetypes that are maybe a little bit more, I'm going to say masculine, but a bit more grounded. It's allowing that to support it. So it's just looking at that combination. And yeah, it's also not thinking we know everything as well, because we can be like, oh, you know what, there's nothing that's going to come from me being an entertainer. There's nothing that's going to come from me being an artist. But it's like, we actually don't know what opportunities are ahead of ourselves. And if we can just step into it, or just lean into it, like you said, even if it's just fun play, things will start to open up from that, because ultimately the universe wants to support us in living our purpose and sharing our gifts. And if that is entertainer, or that is artist, whatever it is, it's going to support us in doing that. So yeah, that would be my answer to that question.
And that is a fantastic perspective. I suppose it comes back to this idea of like having some patience and not feeling like you need to have all the answers and change everything tomorrow. It's nice to have that grand goal, like you said. And like, I agree violently with what you've just shared there. The idea of like, it makes sense when you spend so much time at work, half of your life, you want it to tick as many boxes as possible, right? So that makes sense to have that like North Star. But perhaps if we have been conditioned, like we've spoken about, and we haven't had this like long history of leaning into our archetype and honoring what our interests are, we don't have that history. Maybe for now, it's as simple as get a pen and paper and start reflecting on, what am I interested in? Like, what actually lights me up, and being really truthful about, and then just seeing where that goes. And a funny little example, I don't want to sound too self-indulgent on this episode, but I'll just give my personal experience. We were laughing the other day about my love for hip hop, right? So it's like, I don't know exactly what that looks like. I'm 32 years old, and it's like, can you carve out a career as a rapper in Australia right now? I don't know, but my God, I just light the fuck up when I start talking about everything in that culture, in that space. So it's like, it could just be as simple as, for me right now, it's like, is there just an opportunity just to allow that more so. I don't have to have all that, but just kind of spend more of my day, having those conversations, researching, whatever it looks like. And that actually lights me up. And it's like taking the judgment away from exactly what it looks like or what the outcome is. It just makes it easier to start walking that path. And while someone tuning in might be like, dude, I got no interest in hip hop, I'm sure you can make that, like, you can see how that would translate into whatever it is, for that person. Is it, you love spending time with animals? Okay, is there an opportunity just to foster, to adopt, to research, or to, is there some sort of support group or community you can be a part of, just to like have that? Because like even just a little taster is better than potentially nothing right now.
Exactly. And I think, yeah, like I said, so step one is totally just getting clear on the things that light you up. And you might find that it's almost like that document where you drop all of that in, that's a working document. You might, take things away over time, you might add things in, but it's always having that as a working document that you experiment with, and just seeing, like, as if you start to experiment with it, if it does light you up, and even like your face lights up when you speak about it, then you can't ignore that. Like, you can't ignore when you have that type of response to something, because it's there for a reason. And see, my go is like, why could you do like podcast interviews with like hip hop people and do things like that? Like, there's so many avenues that you could just explore from that, and that you could marry together.
I got some shit cooking, don't worry.
And it's just, and yes, I love that. And like the more unique, the better. Like, and the more examples. Like, I love to give examples around people marrying up these archetypes in their own way. And it's like, teacher, entrepreneur were my top two, and that was a game changer for me, because I'd always seen myself as a teacher, but I'd never seen myself. And this is when I was like still stuck, because even teacher, you can almost get stuck into thinking, oh, okay, teacher means primary, high school teacher. But that teacher can transcend in so many other environments. And then it was when I saw that I had entrepreneur as my second, I was like, oh, I'm like, I want to, solve problems in the world, and I'm not going to, and I want to have my business, but I don't want to create a product or service, so to say. I want to teach someone something to solve a problem in the world. And that was me marrying up my two. And so you think about, okay, so entertainer, you might typically go down, okay, I've got to be a musician, I've got to be an actor or actress, I've got to be, a comedian. That's our stereotypical career links with those archetypes. But how they manifest can actually look so different or so unique to you. So starting to get like creative with the archetypes, I think is really cool. And another example I love is in the CrossFit that I trained at. I didn't make this connection at the start, but we can imagine our like CrossFit, our CrossFit people, for not falling to stereotype, but that they would definitely have that warrior archetype to them. They they're really tough. They love a challenge. They love to obviously overcome those physical challenges. But the CrossFit that I went to, the owner, when he would be explaining the WOD or he'd be explaining the workout of the day, he'd put on a French accent, and like, he'd be like, sorry guys, if you don't understand me, like, I'm just speaking French. Like, he was very funny, like very, very funny. And I could see, I'm like, he's got this entertainer warrior archetype. And so, he's not on stage performing, but he's bringing that entertainer element into an area that excites him, which is CrossFit. So it's like, it's not allowing, don't, I guess, pigeonhole yourself to think it's got to look a certain way. They can manifest in many different ways.
I love it. I love it a lot. Casey, how can people connect more with you? I'll put it in the show notes, but where do we find you?
Just on Instagram. That's where I spend a lot of my time. So Instagram is my main platform. So people feel free to reach out, send me a message, and I'll shoot you a link with that with the quiz as well, for people to complete, and allow it just to, it might not really land too much to begin with. It may land a lot, like it did for me, because there is a bit of a blurb that you'll get for each of your archetypes. But you know, you might then find a couple of weeks down the track, you'll be driving and something will drop through, or you have a conversation, something will drop through. So it's a really great awareness tool. And then, yeah, just being attentive to the things that excite you and the things that you excel at, as a really good way for unlocking that passion and ultimately the purpose down the track too.
Very eloquently shared. Thank you once again for carving out the time. So much juice in this chat. You know, I love doing this show and I love connecting with people, but this was one that I was really excited by, and you know, something that value myself. So I know people tuning in would have as well. Guys, if you enjoyed, put up on your socials, tag the two of us, and let us know if something landed most. But passion, purpose, aligning into that and honoring these archetypes and learning more about ourselves. There's our homework for the next couple of weeks. So until the next episode, guys, thanks for tuning in, and be sure to connect with KC.
Thanks for having me.